On my 70th birthday, I planned a beautiful celebration and invited all my children. Nobody showed up. I called my youngest son, and my daughter-in-law screamed in the background, "Tell that poor old hag we have more important things to do." The next day, she got a surprise when she tried to enter my house. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story to the end and write in the comments what city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Carol, and I am 70 years old. I never thought I'd reach this age and feel invisible within my own family, but on that morning of March 15th, as I prepared for my birthday party, hope still flickered in my heart. I had cleaned every corner of the house for 3 days and prepared my children's favorite dishes. The dining table looked perfect with the best tablecloth, which I had made myself years ago. The napkins were carefully folded, and the plates from the good china set, which I only brought out for special occasions, were ready. The aroma of pot roast with roasted vegetables and creamy mashed potatoes filled the entire kitchen. The same pot roast that Kenneth, my oldest son, always said nobody made as well as I did. The hours slowly passed. At 1 p.m., when everyone was supposed to arrive, I sat in the living room, looking out the window. Every engine noise made me jump from my armchair. I thought they were finally coming, but the cars just drove past my house. By 7 p.m., the silence had become deafening. The dishes grew cold in the kitchen, and the candles I had placed on the cake began to melt. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. With trembling hands, I picked up the phone and dialed Kenneth's number. "Hello?" His voice answered, but it sounded distracted, as if he were watching TV. "Kenneth, my son, it's me. Are you on your way yet? Dinner's been ready for a while." There was a long pause.
I could hear voice in the background, Laukata, the sound of the television.
"Oh, Mom, I completely forgot. We're at a friend's house."
Melissa organisiert a small get-together.
Melissa, my daughter-in-law, the woman who had made me feel like an outsider in my own family since the day she married Kenneth. "But my son, it's my birthday. I cooked all the food you love."
I cleared the house. Mom, don't be so dramatic.
You know how it is. Next time, give us more notice. More notice. I had reminded them for weeks. I had called each of my 4 children to confirm they would come. Everyone had said yes. And the others, Amanda, Brian, Kevin, aren't they coming either? I don't know, Mom. Everyone's doing their own thing.
You understand, right?
No, I didn't understand. I didn't understand how I had raised 4 children who now treated me as if I were a burden, as if my 70th birthday was just an inconvenience in their busy lives. "That's fine, my son. Have a good time." "Mom, don't be like that, we'll stop by later." I hung up, knowing full well that later never meant never. I sat on the armchair in the living room, surrounded by the silence and the scent of all the food that no one would eat, but something inside me couldn't accept it. I picked up the phone again and called Kevin, my youngest son. He had always been the most affectionate, the one who had spent the most time with me as a child. The phone rang several times before he answered. "What's up, Ma?" "Kevin, my son, are you coming for dinner? It's my birthday, and I've prepared everything you love." I heard movement on the other end, as if he were holding the phone away from his ear. Then, crystal clear, the voice of his wife, Stephanie, screaming in the background, "Tell that poor old hag we have more important things to do." The world stopped. Those words pierced my chest like daggers. The poor old hag. That's how my daughter-in-law saw me, that's how they all saw me. Kevin came back to the phone, his voice uneasy. "Ma, I can't right now. I have commitments." "That's fine, my son. Have a nice evening." I hung up and remained seated, feeling the tears stream down my cheeks. 70 years of life. 50 years devoted entirely to my children. And this was the result. A table full of cold food and the certainty that for my own family, I was nothing more than that poor old hag who bothered them with her needs. I slowly stood up and went into the kitchen. I packed all the food into containers. I washed the plates no one had used. I blew out the candles on the cake that no one had sung for. With every movement, it felt as if something inside me was breaking. That night, I went to bed early but couldn't sleep. Stephanie's words echoed repeatedly in my head. The poor old hag, poor. Did they really think I was poor? If only they knew the truth. For the first time in years, I thought about all the sacrifices I had made, the nights I had stayed awake caring for their sick children, the money I had spent on their education, the times I had gone without new clothes to give them what they needed. And now, when the only thing I wanted was to spend my birthday with them, I didn't even deserve that. Something changed that night, something broke, but something also awakened. As I stared at the ceiling in the dark, I made a decision. I would no longer be that poor old hag who settled for the crumbs of affection they threw my way. It was time for them to find out who Carol Johnson really was. The days after my birthday passed in a grey haze. I couldn't get Stephanie's words out of my head. That poor old hag. Each time I remembered it, I felt a mix of pain and anger that I didn't know how to handle. I did something I hadn't done in years. I looked at old photos. I took the cardboard boxes out of the closet in my bedroom, boxes that contained decades of memories. With each picture I saw, I realized how much my place in the family had changed. There I was at 25, freshly married to George, little Kenneth in my arms. Back then, my eyes shone with hope. George worked in construction, and I dedicated myself entirely to the home. We were poor, it was true, but we were happy. Or at least I was. I flipped through the album and saw a photo of Kenneth at 5 years old, with Amanda just born. I looked tired but smiled with my little girl in my arms while Kenneth clung to my skirt. By that time, George had already started drinking more than was good for him, but I still believed everything would get better. The next photos showed the arrival of Brian and then Kevin. 4 children in 8 years. My youth passed between diapers, bottles, and sleepless nights. George was there less and less, whether due to work or the bottle. I became both father and mother. I paused at a photo that broke my heart. It was Kenneth's elementary school graduation. There I stood in a dress I had altered 3 times because I had no money for a new one. I clapped proudly as my son received an award for being the best student. George wasn't there that day. He was drunk in some bar in the city. I flipped further, remembering all the times I had to choose between my needs and those of my children. When Kenneth wanted to go to summer camp, and I sold my only gold ring to pay for it. When Amanda needed new shoes for school, and I wore my broken ones for another 6 months. When Brian got pneumonia, and I didn't eat for 3 days to pay for the medication. But it wasn't just the money, it was everything, my time, my energy, my dreams. Before I married, I wanted to be a teacher. I loved the idea of teaching children, of making a difference in their lives. But when Kenneth arrived, I buried that dream forever. My mission was to be a mother, and that demanded everything from me. I came to the photos of when George fell ill. Liver cancer, the doctor said. Too many years of alcohol had taken their toll. For 2 years, I nursed him day and night. I gave him his medication, washed him, fed him. I changed his adult diapers when he could no longer go to the bathroom alone. My children were already grown by then, but none offered to help me. "You were always good at these things, Mom," Kenneth would tell me when I asked him to stay for just one night. When George died, I thought I could finally find some peace, but it wasn't so. Now I was the grandmother available 24/7. Kenneth and Melissa started dropping their children off with me every weekend. "We need time to ourselves," they'd say. Amanda did the same with her twins. Brian brought me his daughter when he had to travel for business, and Kevin just showed up when he needed money. I put the photos away and went to the kitchen to make myself some coffee. As I waited for the water to boil, I looked out the window into the garden. There stood the swing set George had put up for the grandchildren. I remembered all the afternoons I had pushed them, heard their laughter, and felt useful and loved. But when was the last time one of them had visited just for a visit? When was the last time one of my children had called just to ask how I was doing, without needing anything from me? I sat at the kitchen table with my cup of coffee, feeling the weight of the years. 70 years old, and I had nothing of my own, apparently not even my own dignity. But then I remembered something I had kept secret for years. Something even George hadn't fully known about. When my mother, Deborah, died 15 years ago, she had left me several parcels of land on the outskirts of the city. Parcels that, I had heard, were now worth a lot of money due to urban development in the area. I had wanted to transfer these properties into my children's names immediately, without telling them. I thought that was the right thing to do, that they would have financial security for their families, but I had never signed the final transfer documents. The papers were still in my drawer, waiting for my final decision. In that moment, drinking my coffee in the solitude of my kitchen, something became clear to me. Perhaps I wasn't as poor as Stephanie thought. Perhaps I had more power than I had believed all these years. I stood up and went to my bedroom. I opened the nightstand drawer where I kept my important documents. There they were, yellowed with time but legally valid. The papers for the properties my mother had left me. Properties that could now be worth a fortune. For the first time in days, I smiled. Perhaps it was time for Carol Johnson to stop being that poor old hag and become the woman she always had the right to be. The week after my birthday, I decided to do something I had been putting off for years: organize all my important papers. It wasn't just about the property documents I had found, but also about understanding exactly what I had and what I didn't. If I wanted to make decisions about my future, I needed to know the whole truth. I pulled out an old shoebox where I had kept bills, receipts, and documents that had accumulated over decades. I placed it on the dining table and began to sort everything by category: electricity, water bills, bank statements, insurance papers, and at the very bottom, wrapped in a plastic bag, the documents my mother had given me before her death. My mother, Deborah Johnson, was a very different woman from me. While I dedicated myself entirely to my family, she had always been more practical, more independent. She had sold produce at the farmer's market her entire life and managed to buy several small plots of land on the edge of town. "Land is the only thing that will never let you down, my child," she always said. When she died, I was so busy taking care of George that I paid little attention to the papers the attorney handed me. I put them away, promising myself I would review them later. But that later had turned into 15 years. Now, with my reading glasses on, I began to study each document carefully. The first property was in what was now the most commercial zone of the city. According to the paper, it comprised 2 significant parcels of land. The second was near the new interstate highway, and the third took my breath away. It was a 5-acre plot, exactly where the region's largest shopping complex now stood. This very mall that my own children visited every weekend, where Melissa bought her expensive clothes, where my grandchildren went to the movies. With trembling hands, I searched my purse for last week's local paper. I had seen an advertisement for land sales in that area. When I found the price per acre, I had to sit down and recalculate 3 times to make sure I wasn't mistaken. If my calculations were correct, this one property alone, where the mall stood, was worth over $1.8 million. I felt the world spin around me. For 15 years, I had lived, counting every penny, worrying about electricity bills, selling my few meager possessions when my children needed money. And all that time, I had been the owner of a fortune. But there was something else I needed to verify. I vaguely remembered the attorney explaining something about a legal process I had never completed when I wanted to transfer the properties to my children's names. I searched through the papers until I found a brown folder containing documents from the law firm of attorney Timothy. Mr. Timothy Sr. had been my mother's lawyer and later mine. He was an older gentleman of the old school who had always treated me with respect. When George died, he had handled all the formalities, charging me almost nothing because he knew my financial situation. In the folder, I found a letter he had written me 5 years ago after I mentioned my intention to bequeath the land to my children. The letter read, "Dear Mrs. Johnson, as I explained to you at the office, the transfer of the properties requires your signature before a real estate attorney and the presence of the beneficiaries. Until this is done, you remain the sole legal owner of the properties. I recommend you carefully reconsider this decision, as the transfer, once completed, will be irreversible." I read the letter several times. I was still the legal owner. I had never transferred anything. All these years, while I lived like a poor woman, I had been a millionaire without knowing it. I sat in that chair for hours, processing all the information. I thought of all the times my children had made me feel like a burden. The occasions when Melissa had made remarks about my old clothes, my small house, my lifestyle. The times Kenneth had sighed in annoyance when I asked him to drive me to the doctor because I didn't have a car. I remembered last year when Kevin lost his job and asked me for a loan. I gave him the last $550 I had saved, money I had scrimped together cent by cent for months. He promised to pay me back as soon as he found work, but he never did. Every time I asked, he would say, "Oh, Mom, you know I'm having a hard time, I'll pay you back later." And Stephanie, who saw me as that poor old hag, while I owned properties worth more than she would earn in her entire life at that trendy boutique where she felt so important. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, thinking of all the possibilities that were opening up to me. I could sell the properties and live comfortably for the rest of my days. I could travel, see places I had always dreamed of. I could buy new clothes, a car, a bigger house, but I also thought of my children. For 70 years, my happiness had depended on theirs. Could I really change that now? The next day, very early, I called the law office of Attorney Timothy. His secretary told me he had already retired, but his son, Attorney Timothy Jr., had taken over all cases. I asked for an appointment for that same afternoon. The office had changed a lot since I had last been there. Now there were computers, modern furniture, and a young secretary who offered me coffee while I waited. When Attorney Timothy Jr. received me, he reminded me a lot of his father. He was friendly, patient, and direct. "Mrs. Johnson, it's good to see you. My father always spoke very highly of you. How can I help you?" I explained my situation, showed him all the documents I had found, and asked him for the current value of the properties. He examined everything carefully, made some phone calls, and after an hour, gave me the news that would change my life forever. "Mrs. Johnson, congratulations. You are the owner of properties valued at approximately $2.5 million. And since the transfer to your children was never completed, you have full control over what you do with them." $2.5 million. The woman they called a poor old hag was a millionaire. I left the law office feeling as if I were walking on clouds. For the first time in a long time, I had options. I had power, and more importantly, I had the choice to decide who truly deserved my generosity. The days after my visit to Attorney Timothy Jr. were the strangest of my life. Outwardly, everything remained the same. I woke up early, did my housework, watched my daytime dramas in the afternoon, but inside, something had completely changed. It was as if I had woken up from a 70-year-long dream. I decided not to tell anyone about the discovery of the properties. I needed time to think, to plan, to decide exactly what to do. All my life, I had acted impulsively when it came to my children, always giving without thinking of the consequences. This time, it would be different. The attorney had explained various options. I could sell all the properties and keep the money. I could sell only a portion and keep the rest as an investment. Or I could develop the properties and become a businesswoman at 70. All options scared and thrilled me at the same time. But before I made a decision, I needed to be sure of one thing. I wanted to see how my family would react if they thought I was no longer available to them. I wanted to know if they truly loved me or if they just needed me. On Tuesday morning, Kenneth called. It was strange for him to call me during the week, so I immediately knew he needed something. "How are you, Mom? You sound different." "I'm fine, my son. What do you need?" "I don't need anything, Mom. I just wanted to know how you are. I think you're still mad about the birthday." Liar. Kenneth never called just to ask how I was doing. I decided to play along. "I'm not mad, my son. I understand you have more important things to do." "Don't say that, Mom. You know we love you very much. In fact, Melissa and I were thinking you could watch the kids this weekend. We're invited to Cancun." There was the real reason for his call. "I can't, Kenneth." "What do you mean, you can't? Do you have plans?" For the first time in my life, I lied to my son. "Yes, I have plans." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Kenneth wasn't used to me saying no. "What kind of plans, Mom?" "My own plans, my son. Things I need to take care of." "But Mom, we've already bought the tickets. The kids can stay with you as always. It's nothing special, really." "Find someone else, Kenneth. I can't. I hung up before he could insist further. The phone immediately rang again, but I didn't answer. I felt a mix of guilt and satisfaction I had never experienced before. The next day, Amanda called. Her conversation followed the exact same pattern as Kenneth's. First, she asked how I was, then she asked me to watch the twins because she had a work emergency. When I told her I couldn't, she got angry. "Mom, I don't understand what's gotten into you lately. You seem like a different person." "Perhaps I am a different person, Amanda." "Are you sick? Do you need a doctor?" It was ironic. She only worried about my health when I couldn't do what she wanted.
I'm perfectly fine.
"I'm just busy." "Busy with what? You never have anything to do." These words hurt more than Amanda probably intended. To her, my life was so empty, so unimportant, that she couldn't imagine I would have anything to do. Well, now I do have something to do. I hung up and turned off the phone. I needed peace to think. On Thursday, I met Mrs. Taylor, my longtime neighbor, at the local grocery store. She had known me since I moved into the neighborhood over 40 years ago, freshly married and pregnant with Kenneth.
Carol, you look different.
"Are you doing all right?" "I'm doing very well, Mrs. Taylor, better than ever. I find you somehow, I don't know how to put it, more upright, more confident." Mrs. Taylor was right. Yes, I felt more upright, more confident. I knew something no one else knew. I had a power no one could imagine, and that changed me from within. "Mrs. Taylor, do you believe a woman our age can completely change her life?" "Oh, my dear, what are you saying? At our age, all you can do is wait to die with dignity." But I didn't want to die with dignity. I wanted to live with dignity. And for the first time in 70 years, I had the means to do so. That afternoon, Attorney Timothy Jr. called me. "Mrs. Johnson, I have important news. A construction company has learned that you are the owner of the property where the shopping complex stands and wants to make a formal purchase offer. They are offering $30 million. $30 million, more than we originally estimated. How much time do I have to decide?" "No rush, Mrs. Johnson, but I must tell you that if you accept, you would need to sign the sale in the next few days. I must also ask you, have you discussed this with your children?" "No, and I don't intend to for now." "I understand. I just want to make sure you are making this decision for yourself, without pressure from anyone." That night, I stayed awake for a long time, pacing around the house. Every corner reminded me of the years I had spent there, all the sacrifices I had made, all the times I had put the needs of others before my own. On Friday morning, I made my decision. I called the attorney and told him I wanted to sell the largest property, the one with the shopping complex. With that money, I would have enough to completely change my life. And I would still have the other 2 properties as security. "Perfect, Mrs. Johnson, shall we schedule the signing for next week?" "Yes, but on one condition. I want this to be kept absolutely confidential until the sale is complete." "Of course, that is your right." After hanging up, I sat in my favorite armchair and smiled with genuine joy for the first time in years. Not because I had money, but because I finally had options. That afternoon, as if the universe wanted to test my new resolve, Stephanie appeared unannounced at my door. She had the children and a suitcase with her. "Mother-in-law, good thing you're home. Kevin and I decided to go away spontaneously this weekend. The children will stay with you." She didn't ask if I could. She didn't ask me for a favor. She simply assumed I would be available, as always. "No, Stephanie, the children cannot stay." Stephanie looked at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "What? No, you always watch them." "This time, I just can't." "Why not? What could you possibly have that's so important to do?" There it was again, that condescending attitude, that idea that my life had no value, that I couldn't have my own plans or needs. "I don't have to explain my reasons to you, Stephanie." Her face completely changed. Surprise gave way to anger and then something that looked like contempt. "I don't understand what's been going on with you lately, mother-in-law. You're very strange. I hope you're not going crazy like old Deborah." Deborah. My mother, the woman who had left me the fortune Stephanie would never dream of. My mother wasn't crazy, Stephanie. She was a very intelligent woman. Stephanie left my house, dragging the children behind her, muttering things I couldn't understand, but I didn't care. For the first time, I had set boundaries, and it felt better than I had imagined. The following Monday, I would sign the sale of the property. On Tuesday, I would officially be a millionaire, and very soon my family would discover that the poor old hag they had so disdained no longer existed. On Monday morning, I woke up earlier than ever. It was the day I would sign the property sale and officially become a millionaire. I put on my best dress, a navy blue one I had bought for George's funeral and only wore on very special occasions. For the first time in years, I put on a little makeup and carefully styled my hair. When I arrived at Attorney Timothy Jr.'s office, the representatives of the construction company were already there. They were 3 men in expensive suits who treated me with a respect I hadn't experienced in a long time. To them, I wasn't a poor old hag. I was the owner of something they wanted, and that gave me power. The signing of the documents took almost 2 hours. Each paper I signed was like closing one chapter of my life and opening a completely new one. When we finished, the attorney handed me a confirmation of the bank transfer, the sum of which I had to read 3 times to believe it was real. $2.5 million in the name of Carol Johnson. Mrs. Johnson, the attorney said as he put away the documents, have you decided what you will do with the other 2 properties? I'll keep them for now. I want to see what happens with my life before I make any further decisions. I left the office feeling like I was walking on air. I decided not to go straight home. Instead, I drove to the shopping complex that had now made me a millionaire. It was strange walking through those halls, knowing that just a few hours ago, it had been my land. I sat down in a cafe and ordered an expensive coffee, one of those I had never allowed myself to buy. As I drank it, I watched all the families passing by, buying things I had never been able to afford. My phone rang. It was Kenneth. Mom, where are you? I was at your house. You're not there. I'm at the shopping complex. At the shopping complex? What are you doing there? You never go to places like that alone. Well, now I do. Okay, I need you to come home. Melissa wants to talk to you. Ah, Melissa, the woman who probably wanted to confront me now because I hadn't watched her children over the weekend. Tell Melissa, if she wants to talk to me, she can find me here.
Mom, don't make it so complicated.
Just come home. No, Kenneth. If Melissa wants to talk to me, she can come here. I'm at the cafe on the 2nd floor. I hung up and waited. 15 minutes later, I saw Kenneth and Melissa coming up the escalator. Melissa had a sour face, visibly annoyed that he had to bring her here. Mother-in-law, what are you doing sitting around here as if you're wealthy? That sentence made me smile inwardly. If only she knew how wealthy I was at that moment. I'm having a coffee. Would you like to sit down? Kenneth sat next to me, but Melissa remained standing with her arms crossed. Listen, mother-in-law, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but you need to get back to normal. You left us stranded this weekend. We couldn't go on our trip because you were so stubborn. I wasn't stubborn, Melissa. I simply had other plans. What plans? You have no social life, no job. You have nothing to do. Your only responsibility is to help the family when we need you. Every word was like a slap in the face, but this time, they didn't hurt. This time, they confirmed that I had made the right decision. My only responsibility, I repeated slowly, is to myself. Kenneth looked at me worriedly. Mom, are you okay? Are you perhaps getting dementia or something? Dementia? So now I had dementia, just because I was defending my dignity. I'm better than ever, Kenneth. Melissa leaned closer to me, her voice full of venom.
Listen, Mutter-in-law.
I don't know what you're imagining, but you need to understand your place in this family. You are an old, single woman with no means. We are the ones who work, who bear responsibility, who are important. Your job is to be available when we need you. My job? I asked calmly. Yes, your job. Watch the grandchildren, be available, don't cause problems. That's what old mothers do. And what do I get in return for this work? Melissa laughed cruelly. In return, you get a roof over your head, food, and the privilege of being part of a family that tolerates you, even though you're not much use anymore. These words were the straw that broke the camel's back. I slowly stood up from my chair, picked up my purse, and looked Melissa directly in the eyes. You know what, Melissa? You're right. I am an old woman, but in everything else, you are mistaken. What am I mistaken about? That you're poor, that you have no means, that you're dependent on us. Kenneth frowned. Mom, what are you talking about? I took the bank confirmation from my purse and placed it on the table. The numbers were clearly visible. $2.5 million. I'm talking about this. Melissa's mouth hung open. Kenneth took the slip with trembling hands. Mom, what is this? Where did this money come from? From the sale of a property that belonged to me. A property I inherited from my mother over 40 years ago. Which property? Melissa asked, her voice now much softer. The property on which this shopping complex is built. Both were silent for a few minutes. I watched their expressions change from confusion to understanding, and then to something that gave me great satisfaction, panic. Mom, Kenneth finally said, why did you never tell us you had properties? Because I wanted to leave them to you. Because I thought you would need them more than I did. But I've changed my mind. Melissa slumped heavily into the chair. Her arrogance had completely vanished. Mother-in-law, we didn't know. You didn't know I was a millionaire, but you knew you treated me like dirt. We don't treat you like dirt, Kenneth protested weakly. Kenneth, your brother's wife called me a poor old hag 2 weeks ago. Today your wife told me my only job was to be available to you and to have the privilege of being tolerated by the family. Kenneth looked reproachfully at Melissa, but she was too busy processing the information to defend herself. Mom, if you have money, why did you continue to live the way you did? Because I didn't know I had it. I only found out a week ago. And do you know what the first thing I thought when I found out was? I thought of sharing it with you, of making your lives easier. But then I remembered my birthday. I remembered how you've treated me for years, and I realized you deserved nothing from me. I stood up to leave. Kenneth grabbed my arm. Mom, wait, we can talk about this. We can sort things out. There's nothing to sort out, Kenneth. Now you know who I really am, and I know who you really are. I walked to the escalator without looking back. For the first time in my life, I was the one walking away. I was the one who had the power. When I got home, I already had 5 missed calls from Amanda, 3 from Brian, and 2 from Kevin. The news spread quickly through the family. That night, for the first time in 70 years, I turned off my phone and went to sleep without worrying if anyone needed me. Whoever needed something from me now would have to earn it. The days after my revelation at the shopping complex were a whirlwind of calls, messages, and unexpected visits. All my children, who had been too busy to visit me for years, suddenly had time. But I had learned something very valuable, the power to say no. The first to show up was Amanda. Less than 24 hours after my meeting with Kenneth and Melissa. She came with the twins, as she always did when she wanted to soften me up. Mom, we need to talk, she said while her sons ran through my living room. We can talk, but the children are not staying. Mom, it'll only take a moment. No, Amanda, if you want to talk to me, take your children home and come back alone. I saw the frustration on her face. Amanda was used to using my grandchildren as an emotional shield, knowing I could never refuse to watch them. But now, the rules had changed. She came back 2 hours later, alone and with a completely different demeanor. Mom, Kenneth told me about the money, and well, I wanted to tell you that I'm very sorry if I ever treated you badly. That was never my intention. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. I also wanted to ask if you could help me with my mortgage. It's very high. No, Amanda, I will not help you with your mortgage. But Mom, I'm your daughter. Aren't mothers supposed to help their children? Aren't children supposed to respect their mothers? Amanda was speechless. For several minutes, She tried to sway me with all the emotional tactics she had perfected over the years, but for the first time in my life, they didn't work. Brian came the next day. His strategy was different. He brought me flowers and a card that read, "For the best mom in the world. Mom, I wanted to apologize for not coming to your birthday. The truth is, I was very stressed with work." "And Brian, how much do you need?" "Excuse me? How much money do you need, because I know you're not just here to apologize." He turned red. "Well, there is something. My business is going through a difficult time right now, and I thought maybe you could invest." "I'm not interested in investing in your business, Brian." "But Mom, it's an incredible opportunity. You could double your money in a year." "My money is very well where it is." Kevin was the last to come, and his visit was the most difficult for me. He had always been my favorite, the baby of the family, and seeing him so desperate hurt more than I expected. "Mom, I know I messed up. I know I haven't been the best son, but I need your help. I'm in debt. I'm about to lose my apartment." "And where is Stephanie?" I asked. "What about your wife? The one who called me a poor old hag. Where is she? Why didn't she come with you to ask me for money?" Kevin lowered his head. "She's at home. She says she can't face you after what happened." "How convenient." "Mom, please. I just need $12,000. That's all." "I promise you, Kevin, do you respect me?" The question surprised him. "Of course I respect you, Mom." "Really? Because the last time we talked, your wife screamed I was a poor old hag bothering you, and you didn't say anything to defend me." I didn't know what to say." "You could have said, 'Don't talk to my mother like that.' You could have hung up. You could have come the next day to apologize. But you didn't do any of that." "Mom, Stephanie was angry. She didn't mean it." "Kevin, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time." That night, after Kevin had left empty-handed, I sat in my kitchen and made the most important decision of my life. I would not give any of my children money. Not because I didn't love them, but precisely because I loved them enough not to allow them to disrespect me any longer. The next day, I did something I had been putting off for weeks. I looked at houses for sale. With $2.5 million, I could buy something much better than my small house in the neighborhood where I had lived for 40 years. The house I found was in a new development with a garden, a 2-car garage, and a beautiful kitchen. It was what I had always dreamed of but never dared to imagine I could have. "Are you sure you want something so large?" the real estate agent asked me. "That's a lot of upkeep for one person." "I'm very sure," I replied, "and I won't be alone. I'll be with Musif. And that's very good company." The house purchase took 3 weeks. During that time, my children tried various strategies to persuade me regarding the money. But the strategy that hurt me the most was Kevin's. He called me crying, telling me that Stephanie had left him, that he was alone, that he had no one but me.
"Mom, I'm your baby.
I was always your baby.
Don't you love ML Anumore?"
I love you, Kevin, but love doesn't mean I have to save you from the consequences of your decisions." "But I'm scared, Mom. I don't know how to live without help." "Then it's time you learned." On the day I moved into my new house, only Mrs. Taylor came to say goodbye. My children were conspicuously absent, probably hoping that if they saw me leave, I would realize my mistake and come running back to rescue them. My new house was everything I had dreamed of and more. I had space for my plants, a kitchen where I could cook for myself without worrying about feeding a whole pack, and a garden where I could drink my coffee in the mornings. 2 months after moving, I decided to do something I had never done in my life: travel. I had always wanted to see the ocean but had never had the money or the time. Now I had both. I spent a week on a luxurious resort island in the Caribbean, where I was treated like a queen. I walked on the beach at sunrise, ate at elegant restaurants, and for the first time in 70 years, I didn't have to worry about anyone but myself. When I returned from the trip, there were 12 messages waiting on my answering machine. All from my children, all in the same desperate tone. Kenneth had lost his job. Amanda was getting divorced and needed money for lawyers. Brian had closed his business. Kevin had been evicted from his apartment. I listened to them all, one by one, and then deleted the messages without returning a single call. That evening, as I ate dinner in my beautiful new kitchen, I thought of something my mother had told me many years ago. My child, the family that respects you is the family you deserve. The one that doesn't respect you, let them go. My mother had been right about many things, about the importance of owning property, about the value of independence, and above all, that love without respect is no love at all. 3 months later, Amanda appeared at my door. She came alone, without the children, and for the first time in years, spoke to me with genuine respect. "Mom, I'm not here to ask you for money. I'm here to ask for your forgiveness." I invited her in and made us both coffee. "Mom, I've thought a lot about how we've treated you. You're right. We didn't respect you. We took you for granted, as if you were just another piece of furniture in the house. And what changed? At first, I was just angry because you didn't give us money. But then something became clear to me. You raised us to be independent, to stand on our own 2 feet. And at some point, we decided it was easier to be dependent on you than to truly be independent." It was the most honest conversation I had had with one of my children in years. "Amanda, I forgive you, but things can't go back to how they were.
I understand.
I just want you to know that I love you, and I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that the money wasn't the important thing. The important thing was losing you." This conversation was the beginning of a new relationship with Amanda. We didn't return to the old dynamic where she used me as a free babysitter, but we began to build something new, something based on mutual respect. Kenneth eventually came to apologize as well, though it took longer and was less sincere than Amanda's. Brian and Kevin continued to call occasionally, always asking for money, so I eventually stopped answering their calls. Today, 2 years after that disastrous birthday, I live in a beautiful house. I travel whenever I want and have healthy relationships with the members of my family who have learned to respect me. I am not the matriarch who sacrifices in silence. I am Carol Johnson, a 72-year-old woman who has finally learned to value herself. And Stephanie, the woman who called me a poor old hag, now works double shifts in a factory because Kevin can't provide the lifestyle she was accustomed to. Sometimes I see her at the supermarket, and she always lowers her gaze when our eyes meet. Life has a strange way of bringing justice, and I am finally living mine. I hope my story has touched you. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, please subscribe to Clara's Stories channel. If you enjoy my stories and want them to continue, I would greatly appreciate a small donation. Every contribution helps me continue to invest time and heart into these narratives. Thank you for your support.